Hello, everyone. Welcome to Drumfills Café. My name is Dennis, and welcome to another episode of this 9th season. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. As usual, I invite you to go check the web pages for Drumfills Café. That is the TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and of course, Facebook pages to go do a like, and of course, a subscription to those pages. And of course, to check out the main page, the website, drumfillscafe.com, to verify about all of this 9th season, what happened in the previous seasons, all the interviews, all the tips, all the editorials. Go check it out, drumfillscafe.com. So let's get to it. My guest tonight, it's kind of an honor actually for me. My guest tonight has been inactive for over 4 decades and has played with pretty much every artist imaginable. Here's the list: Marillion, GTR, Joe Satriani, Aretha Franklin, Alice Cooper, Fuel, and so many more. He was also the owner and operator of a well-known studio called Skyline Studios in NYC, and is currently busy playing some very awesome music from progressive rock's best, such as Yes, Genesis, ELP, Rush, and so many more, with his group called ProgJect. Please welcome the very versatile Jonathan Mover.
Thank you very much. It's really nice to be here, and I appreciate the wonderful intro. Very nice.
You're welcome, Jonathan. Thank you for coming and talking to us tonight.
No, my pleasure. All good.
So where are you today? Are you on the move? Are you doing something studio-wise? What was your day like today, actually?
I'm at home in Los Angeles right now. I actually moved out here about 7 years ago. And most of my days at the moment are setting up and getting ready for the next ProgJect tour, which is in June. And so I'm still wearing a few too many hats, but it's just, it's par for the course with me. Part of it is being a control freak, and the other part is just, not finding the right people yet to take over some of the things that I've been doing. So I'm booking, I'm managing, I'm, renting the tour bus and getting visas together and all that stuff.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of my days are, partly spent on the computer. Other times, I'm on the kit, working on it, getting it ready. But most of my practice routine with ProgJect these days is in my head. It's not on the kit. I think about everything. I put the medleys together. I put the arrangements together in my head, work out things on Pro Tools, think about how I want to play it on the kit. And then I modify the kit to the new set we're going to be playing, and then start to dig into rehearsals. So yeah, right now is just really a lot of computer time, and wearing the business hat. Yeah.
So the business part, I wasn't aware that you're doing mostly of the business part from this project.
Yeah, I mean, again, it just kind of turned out that way when I came up with the idea to do ProgJect, which was actually born from your guys in Montreal, the Musical Box.
Yes,
and
that's true. Yes.
Yeah, how it came about was, the year before COVID. Everything is pre or post COVID now, So right before COVID, I got what I get most of the time in my career, whether it be for studio work or live, the rescue call. That there's a band in trouble with their drummer for whatever the reasons are, and can I jump on and sub until they get through, the period of difficulty. So I got a last minute call with them, and I played with them, and no rehearsals, no nothing. I just flew across the country and jumped on stage with them.
Really?
And
wow.
We went for it, and it was really great. They're a lovely bunch of guys, and everybody was giving me cues, and I was following as much of the roadmap as I could, but it was just jumping into the deep end. But what was so amazing was I was catapulted right back to being 14 and 15 years old in my parents' basement in Massachusetts with headphones on, and practicing the seconds out and the lamb and everything, and dreaming one day of playing with those guys. So it wasn't long before they had a drummer that was ready to come in from Montreal, and I went back to LA. But I really felt a void, and I really missed the happiness and the joy that I had on stage every night.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought to myself, I want to keep this ball rolling. But, I don't want to play just one band's music. I
Right.
love all prog rock, and I don't want to dress up like anybody. And I don't want to play somebody else's kit, because it was amazing. The kit that they had, although it was right-handed, if I remember correctly, was a exact replica down to bits and pieces of hardware of like the 1973 or 74 tour. And I didn't change anything. I just sat down and played it, which, wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't comfortable. So I had a different concept of doing not quite a tribute band, but more of an homage.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to cover all of prog, not just one band.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how it all came about. And from the concept to making the phone calls and asking around who might be interested, I just, I put my foot forward, and I didn't slow down or stop. And I didn't even really have time to think about somebody else coming in to help me. It was just boom, 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 one thing after another. And at that time, I had moved my recording studio, Skyline, that you had mentioned before, thank you,
Mm-hmm.
from New York City out to LA.
Right.
And ended up taking over a company out here with a 22,000 square foot massive building with film stages and sound stages and recording suites and studios. And so I had the perfect opportunity to rehearse like we were going on a full production tour.
Okay.
And really put something together, in a Class A setting, which just helped. But now, it's taking off. It's getting bigger each year, and we're expanding more. And it is time to find some people to help out. Mostly an agent would be great, and then I can focus on more things that I want to do also for the band. That right now there are only so many hours in the day, and every day is pretty full. So that's what's going on.
Well, first off, thank you, Musical Box, for
for
calling you and making you enjoy music again.
Yeah.
And so I understand basically, yes, from reading from your bio and checking you out these past couple of days, that you grew up in the prog rock era basically, and that is pretty much the music that's close to your heart, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, it is. I went through a couple of phases. There was always music in my house. My dad was a trumpet and trombonist, and so he was always listening to big band, jazz, everybody from Stan Kenton to Maynard Ferguson. And so I was, turned on to that stuff and had a big appreciation for it. And of course, the Beatles, they're the be all and end all for me. And
right.
But my older brother, who was going through the hippie times when I was a little kid, I remember, he had some Yes and King Crimson, and of course I remember seeing the record covers and being blown away just by the artwork. And then I remember hearing a song called Inagata Davida by a band called Iron Butterfly that he was playing, and I heard the drum solo and I freaked out. So I told my parents I want to play drums. And I think I was in 3rd or 4th grade elementary school. So I would have been, maybe 10 or 11 years old.
Okay.
And they signed me up in elementary school. And, instead of finding myself sitting on a drum kit learning how to play a groove to play along, I was in a kids orchestra with about 40 other kids who didn't know how to play their instruments like I didn't, standing up at a snare drum with, sticks as big as baseball bats, trying to learn a Philip Sousa march. And it just didn't, capture me at all.
Right.
So I visited drums, and then I let it go.
Okay.
And then, sometime after that, I remember hearing Lucky Man on AM radio. And when I heard the outro and Emerson's Moog solo, then I said, oh, I like that sound. Maybe I'll play keyboards and synthesizer. So ELP had already had some records out. We're talking 1974, 75 already. And so my folks took me down to the local record store to buy the Lucky Man record. And when I was thumbing through the ELP bin and I saw the record cover to Brain Salad Surgery, that was it. It didn't matter that Lucky Man wasn't on it. I had to have it.
Right.
So I got the record and, of course, opened up the Giga artwork and pulled out the poster and, put the music on. and the whole record blew my mind. But when I heard Toccata, and of course Carl Palmer's drum solo, which incorporated Moog drums, kind of was best of all worlds. And so that got me back interested in drums. And from that point on, I took some local lessons from a great teacher who ended, each lesson was a series of the Rothman books, how to
Oh, I'm
play
not familiar with those.
yeah. Oh, Joe Rothman, he's really great with beginner books.
Okay.
How to take a paradiddle and put it around the drum kit, and how to play jazz time and a cha-cha and a rumba, and so I went through all of that. But at the end of each lesson, my drum teacher let me choose a song and bring a record in. And
nice.
I'll never forget the very first song I ever played to, headphones on, start to finish, without stopping, was Sabir and Katru off of Yes Song.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, I used to bring that in, and I brought in ELP and, King Crimson, Genesis, all that stuff. And that's how it really got drums, about in two different occasions, but it really was prog rock the second time around listening after I went through the Inagata-Devita psychedelic phase. And then from there it was, one thing leads to another. Roger Dean record covers or on other bands, and Giger did other artwork. And then of course, you find out that Bill Bruford, who was one of my first heroes along with Carl, also sat in with Genesis. He played with Crimson. And then Phil Collins did Brand X, and the next thing you know, it's this incestuous family of amazing drummers and musicians with just this wealth of music that still to this day I'm enjoying as much as I did, if not more so, some of it now than when I heard it, 50 plus years ago. So yeah, it's been a great thing.
It is fascinating, and you wonder, like, what was in the water back in the UK in those days, and what is it? Is it the school education? Is it something musical that they learn over there because as you say, most of the prog rock bands, were coming from the UK basically, and it's just interesting to figure out, like, what was it over there that made this,
I think, having well, after high school, when I was thinking, what career path am I going to take? Do I go the road of, university or Berkeley or something, or do I go out there and try to start playing? So I chose to move to London after high school. And so, with some of the people that I began to work with, what I found was they were more in tune with classical music and that type of, grandiose arrangements and orchestrations. Whereas I think with American music, it was more jazz oriented in their background. And so for me, of course, I mean, Frank Zappa is with the Beatles, the greatest of progressives, but let's leave those two aside. And when you listen to more of the American type of prog, like I loved Happy the Man, and Happy the Man really came from a lot of jazz roots.
Okay.
And then, of course, some of the other prog bands or that dabbled in prog, like Kansas and Utopia, I like them too. And there was a bit of jazz in that from their drummers, but also influenced by, Genesis and Yes and Crimson. But I think the bigger orchestrations and the dynamics and the arrangements of the English prog came from their, the music that came before them, which was a lot more classical over there in Europe than we had here.
That does make sense, because I think, as you would say, in American music, there's more of a blues, rootsy,
that too.
folklore to it, not as much as classical. And it would make sense because it is that mesh of rock and classical sort of put together, on instruments that are made for more of a jazz band, if you will, quote unquote. But yes, it is fascinating that melting pot is what I was trying to say, of all those bands from back there. And Siberian Katru is I mean, I was happy to just play some Motley Crue when I was a kid, so I was just happy to imitate Tommy Lee. So that's quite a different level there.
quick funny story about Tommy Lee, and I've got a lot of stories, so I'll try to keep them short. But
no, please go.
I was not a Motley Crue fan by any stretch of the imagination. In high school, Metallica, Motley Crue, no, thank you. But I had a buddy of mine. Well, Tommy Aldridge was at the time playing drums for Whitesnake.
Right.
And this is when the big Whitesnake record came out. Actually, it's Ainsley Dunbar on the record, but Tommy was in the band.
I see.
And Motley, I think, had the Girls, Girls, Girls record out, and they were opening up for Whitesnake.
That's 87 about, yeah.
Yeah. I was home from London, and I got an invitation from some of the guys from Zildjian. Do you want to join us for dinner? We're going to go see Whitesnake, and after Whitesnake, we'll leave and have dinner with Tommy and everybody. Now, by this time, the Crew record had taken off, and so they flopped. They flipped around. Whitesnake was now opening up for Crew.
Wow.
So we go to the Worcester Centrum, and I catch the Whitesnake set, which was great for what it was. And then all the guys from Zildjian are saying, we're going to go across the street to Legal Seafood, and we'll be there having dinner. We'll save you a seat. I said, okay, I want to catch like 10 minutes of this Tommy Lee character, and see what they're all about. Man, I was glued to my seat. I missed the dinner. I became one of the biggest Tommy Lee fans. I loved the Crew live, and then the records they did after that, they were unbelievable. And Tommy is no slouch.
It's funny how, I mean, of course, he's had a very colorful life. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
He is Tommy Lee. But for me personally, and of course, I'm a different generation. I am from that 80s hair band era and that sort of thing. And we'll talk about Alice and all those people afterwards if you're interested. Yeah. But to me, that's where I started. To me, progressive rock was later. And funny enough, it started with Musical Box of all places. Yeah. But to me, Tommy Lee he's just so solid.
Yeah.
He's so in the pocket, and the fills are so melodic and
very
so
well thought out,
and at the right place. Yeah. And it's just, and for some reason, people don't talk about that. It's interesting. Yeah. And yes, he's the ultimate showman. I mean, I saw Dr. Feelgood live, and of course my ears were literally almost bleeding from the show. It was so loud.
It was loud, yeah. We opened up Satriani, the trio at that time. We opened up for Motley on some of the Feelgood stuff, so we got to watch them and hang out with them. And that's when I really got to know Tommy, who's a lovely guy. And all the guys actually were really, really nice. They treated us very well. And it was funny because the first show that we did, I mean, these guys are playing the Enormo Domes. And so we were opening up for 10, 15,000 people, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And, the trio, we get up there and we're playing, and there's the 4 guys in the front row of Crew watching us play, which is really cool, and we're looking at each other and all excited about it. So we finish our set and we towel off and do our thing. And then me, Stu, and Joe go to the front row to watch them. And then about 2 or 3 songs in, their bouncers come over and remove us.
Okay.
What's going on? They were too nervous.
Oh.
They didn't want us like right in front of them watching everything that they were doing. But they were great guys, really, really great guys. And yeah, the ultimate entertainers and, great players. Again, really Mick Mars, rock solid guitar playing, and Tommy was just killing it. Yeah, it was good.
No, for sure. For me, it was a good foundation school. Some people started with the Beatles. For me, it was them. That whole Guns N' Roses, them, that sort of thing that got me into drumming. And of course, Tommy's just a showman. So you see him 12 sticks and do all this stuff, which absolutely drove my bandmates nuts when I was learning that stuff and was doing it. Like, just play, damn it! Stop twirling your sticks and stop doing tricks. But it's cool, man.
It is cool. And you hit the cymbal and choke it with one hand.
But yeah, for me, from a foundation, but going back to your project and going back to progressive rock, for me, it was a Musical Box. And I'll always remember this is back in '96 when they were starting to get known and everything. And they do, I think it was Selling England by the Pound, if I'm correct. And the opening is basically the singer, who is Peter Gabriel, who looks out to the crowd, and there's a big sort of screen in the background, and there's just a pair of eyes in the total darkness with that which I forget the name of it, but I'm
Watch for
the Sky. With that big pad, pad is just very grumbly and everything, and just a pair of eyes looking at the crowd, and you're like, oh, what is this? What is about to happen? The show just blew me away, and that's when I did a deep dive into Genesis and Yes and all those guys afterwards, and discovered all this amazing music. So it's interesting that you're sort of, I don't want to say tribute. I think it's more of a labor of love, the way you're expressing it, and not necessarily a tribute, sort of a homage.
That's that's how I put it. It's a tribute to a genre, which is kind of hard to explain sometimes, because when you say you're in a tribute band, they think you're going to come out like the Musical Box, dressed up like the people, and we just, well, you'll see it hopefully in June when we're up playing. We cover the gamut, and we rearrange a lot. We put our own twist things, and a lot of surprises during tunes that people don't know is coming, and so we definitely take it to another level, not beyond the artist that wrote it, but we put our own spin on it.
I see.
And I'm lucky to have players that can really nail this stuff and love it like I love it, so it's fun for them too.
Let's talk about the players. You had, I'm not sure if he's still on but you had, of course, a Canadian on the Michael
Welsh.
The singer.
He's actually Welsh. Yeah.
Oh, is he Welsh? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But
everybody knows him from Canada. Yeah, Michael was the first singer. And I'm grateful that he, was interested and available, because it certainly gave me that extra little bit of cred, when having like that. And it's funny, when we first spoke, Saga wasn't doing anything, and he was like, yeah, we're really winding down, not a lot's going on, this will be great, I'm totally into it, sounds great, let's get together and see what happens. And then I think as soon as some people found out what he was doing, and now all of a sudden we're on tour, Saga's got all these dates being booked, and which was good for him, because that really is that's his forte.
Right.
And so we just parted in good ways, that he was going to go back and do a bunch of other things. We'll see what happens in the future to maybe do some stuff again, because he's a great guy and a great singer. But yeah, getting him out of the starting gate was really, really great, and I appreciate that very much. The band right now, I'm super excited. Well, I've got Mike Keneally on guitar, and just guy is insane. I've played with some serious musicians that I feel very blessed to have done, but Keneally is really something else. And
that's saying something if you play with Satriani. So just say something right there.
Yeah. And everybody knows how incredible Mike is on guitar. You should hear him on keyboards. That's what he started out on. It's like, he's just amazing. And he's also not only the nicest guy in the world, and I really mean that, he is so great to hang with. He's also a walking encyclopedia of everything to do with music. So if you have any questions about, but he's also just so easygoing. Life isn't easy on the road sometimes, and you show up at a gig and there are things that are supposed to be there that aren't, and it's disappointing. And he's the first one to come up to me and say, "Man, it's going to be a great gig. Don't worry about it." And that's really nice. So I love having him on board. He's a pleasure to hang and work with in every way, and he really elevates the whole system. Rio on keyboards is great. He's a madman, wizard, and he loves prog, and he loves the authentic prog, the mini moog and the opera pro soloist, and he really digs deep into the real sounds. His life could be so much easier if he just jumped on the digital bandwagon, but go as much analog as possible.
Right.
So we get through that, and I've had a couple of different bass players, which has been nice, and some great people coming and going. But Pete Griffin, who I did use about a year or so ago, who wasn't available on the last two legs that we did, he was busy with Death Clock, but I love playing with Pete. Not only does he have the chops from playing with Dweezil Zappa and Death Clock and those type of situations, but he's got a groove. And I love playing polyrhythms. I love doing the cuckoo stuff. That's all a lot of fun. But underneath it all, no matter what I play, I always want there to be a groove to it. And Pete is one of those few guys that has the bass chops to tackle Chris Squire or Jeff Berlin or John Wetton or whatever. But man, he's just like Godzilla when it comes to playing and locking in with my kick and snare. So I gave him enough notice this last time around that here's what's coming up. Please book me before you book anybody else. So I'm very excited about that. But the big part for me is Alessandro Del Vecchio from Italy is coming in to take the front man. And this is the guy that we needed from day one. No disrespect to anybody else, but he's got a 4.5 octave range. So, you know, we couldn't do Rush unless it was instrumental. And, you know, we kind of faked our way through Yes, trying to spin on it and use a harmonizer, and it didn't quite cut it. But
because John Anderson's really high there.
And so, you know, when I first got introduced to Alessandro, again, like Keneally, super, super nice. I mean, I can't wait to work with him. But we were FaceTiming back and forth. And so I said, you know, this is not an audition. The gig is yours. I've already looked you up online. And, you know, not only can you sing your ass off, but we're getting along so well just chatting on FaceTime. This is going to be great. He's a vegan. I'm a vegan. You know, he doesn't drink. And you know, he's straight as an arrow and really, you know, focused about music and work. And as I said, this is not an audition, but do you mind if I send you, like, you know, a dozen snippets of the different arrangements and the stuff that I'm putting together, just so I can hear your spin on it, you know? And so, yeah, no problem. And so I sent him a folder with, I think, 16 bits and pieces of everything we do. From the highest of Rush all the way down to, you know, the Greg Lake and John Wetton
stuff.
And he sends me back a message and says, I got the folder. I'll have a listen to it tonight, and I'll see if I can, you know, start getting to it tomorrow. He's got a little studio in his house. We were on tour while this was going on, actually. We were out with, you know, the different guys last year. And so the next afternoon, I have a Dropbox folder with every song in it, complete. And I listened to it, and my jaw was on the ground. And I called Keneally over, and I just said, "Put your headphones on and just scroll through these tunes." And he just said, "This is the guy we've been waiting for." So we're very excited, and June is going to be the debut, and I think 4 of the shows will be up in your neck of the woods.
Awesome. How did you go about because of course different drummers, different bands, different drum sets. How did you go about say, well, I need this, I need that, I'll take this away? Like, how did you construct? Because of course we're in a drum channel, and I'm sure most of my viewers will be interested. How did you construct your drum set for this project?
It's a great question, and after I answer that, I'll tell you about the dilemma that I'm up against, and I would value your opinion. So I wanted to, you know, take a little bit of everybody and be as authentic as possible. I didn't want to go double bass because I love playing single kick. I just love it. And I went down to a 20, you know, just to do what Phil Collins and Bill did in the beginning. But I needed, you know, multiple tom-toms, and I had a hybrid kit that Pearl had put together for me, which I don't know if you've seen photos, but my toms are only like 4 and 5 inches deep.
Yeah, they're very not deep. They're very shallow.
Very shallow, yeah. And they're all acoustic. Everybody thinks I'm triggering because they sound huge, but it's just, you know, Evans heads with good microphones and a great front of house. So I put together the hybrid kit. So I've got the multiple toms, so I could do the Phil and the Neil Peart and the Barrymore Barlow type of stuff, and Carl Palmer. And then, you know, I wanted real tubular bells, even though they weigh 250 pounds.
Really?
Times, crotales, gongs, you know, what else we got? All different cowbells and crashers and wood blocks. And I just wanted to be as authentic as I could be. And I didn't want to use samples. The only samples that I'm triggering from my CD path is like some of the keyboard things that are overdubbed in the studio that nobody can play. I'll hit it, or you know, stuff like that. But all drums and percussion are live, and everybody else is playing all of their parts. But I just really wanted to kind of put together a little bit of everybody. So I've got Phil and Bill and Carl and Neil and Barrymore and John Weathers and you know, all of it's in there. And that way, no matter what I'm playing, I can, to a certain degree, replicate what they were doing, and in appreciation of what they did, because there are some things that I want to play exactly what they played because they were so much fun for me when I was a kid practicing them. And there are other things that I do completely on my own that I'm not trying to emulate what they did, and I've come up with my own part. So it's a nice, you know, mixture of everything. But the kit is a blast. And you know, when I get into something, I take everything apart, put it together, and you know, the Pearl rack system is second to nobody. So they sent all these extra bits and pieces, and I took hacksaws and I took drills and I cut them to different sizes, and the same thing with the actual mounts. So the rack itself stays together as far as the rails. So all of my hardware for everything that's hanging on the rack stays on a rail. So this whole massive kit goes into one small 4.5-foot coffin for hardware.
Okay.
And then my drum tech can put my kit up in 20 minutes.
Wow.
Because all you do is, you know, you put the 4 legs up, and then you wheel the gong and the tubular bells up. All you do is put the drums and the cymbals on because the hardware's already there. Yeah, so it's quite efficient as well. Did I send you a photo of the kit? Have you seen it?
No, you sent me some promo photos, of course, of you playing. But I went on and I went to check the promo videos from ProgJect and saw you play. So I have an idea of what you're talking about. And of course, we'll put up some stuff as we're talking during this conversation.
Right. Yeah, I'll send you some nice kit shots. Yeah, so you'll see everything. Awesome. And again, you know, because I get so anal about this, I'm so into it. The rack is custom-made Pearl that I did for tubular bells. So, you know, I go into my computer and I map out, you know, the different heights and the different widths between all of them. And I cut down the rails, and then I drilled all screw eyes through the top rails to put the octaves up in the right place.
Okay.
Strung my own lines across with rubber grommets, so everything is hanging and free. And I don't have a tubular bells rack with the bell built into it. It's really, it's pretty cool. It's a fun system.
Okay, interesting. That one I'm gonna have to see, but I sort of understand what you're saying. Basically, you didn't do the whole rack thing in the back. You just sort of did your own.
No, it's a complete rack, but instead of having an actual rack for tubular bells, I took Pearl hardware and redesigned it and made a tubular bell rack out of Pearl hardware.
I see.
Yeah,
I see.
You got to see it to get it, but it was it was like 3 days in a machine shop, and voila, it was really cool.
Did it go cling? Did it shine once you were done?
Oh, it certainly did.
It's funny. I'm now thinking of Tubular Bells, the album, but that's another story.
You know, if there was more going on, I played with Mike for a little bit, which was a lot of fun. And if there was more going on in Tubular Bells, it would be great to do that. But you know, to wait 15 minutes to online, I don't know if the audience would hang in that long. But
yeah, great. We're talking about Mike Oldfield, of course. You can check that out, of course, separately. But that sounds amazing. That sounds like really a labor of love, and it sounds really like you're having fun. And it's interesting because you're doing your own touch. Because of course, if you want to see exactly to a T of what Phil played, you know, back then you can go see Musical Box, or you can go see this other stuff. So it's interesting that you're doing your own sort of thing respectfully, but also of labor of love. So that way you have a different, you know, sort of different expression or a different way of playing this music, but you know, with a touch of what you would like to play, basically.
And this is where the dilemma is.
Okay.
So you know, we're going over to the UK and Europe later this year, and there's no way I can ship my kit right now over there. It's just not gonna $50 to get it to Germany, and I had no idea, you know, even though it's all compact. Yeah, it was like 15 grand.
Okay, 50. Wow. Okay.
So I love playing a 4-piece kit and just like killing a rack and a floor tom. And like the old days of Bruford and Phil and Carl Palmer in the beginning, you know, So when you look at Carl on the first tour, and you look at Bill in early Crimson and early Yes, you know, he's got a 4-piece kit, but he's got a gong and tubular bells, and Phil had tubular bells and the gong. And so I'm really having a battle within myself, because the show is really important. And so, you know, I can get a Pearl drum kit in Europe of a single kick and 3 or 4 racks, but it's not going to be this cool thing that I'm playing here yet. So do I do that and I still try to build it up, or do I go 4-piece and really force myself to play the fuck out of it, and but get a ring of tubular bells and a gong behind me? So that's, I haven't decided yet, but I'm kind of heading in the direction of showing that I can do everything that they did on a 4-piece kit, and we won't miss anything. But we'll see.
I'm kind of leaning to the. I want to see that, and I want to hear that actually.
I've done it before.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's like another side story. I was just telling a friend of mine about this a couple of days ago. On the Satriani 1990 Flying in a Blue Dream tour, I had a kit that was as big as Simon Phillips. You know, it was
right, the whole
six concert tom all the way down to the 20 gong bass drum, double bass, gongs, 2 octapads, the whole deal. And we were doing a leg of the tour, opening up for the Steve Miller Band.
Oh, wow.
And so we had just played in Reno, Nevada, and the 18-wheeler that had all of our gear left for San Francisco, where we were playing the next night. And Stu, Joe, and I took a little jet, you know, for an hour from Reno to San Fran, straight to the hotel, went to sleep. And at 5:30 in the morning, our phones were ringing. Emergency from the tour manager, get out of bed and get down to the lobby right now. We thought maybe somebody died or something. They stole our 18-wheeler.
Okay.
They drove our tour away. I didn't have a pair of sticks. Joe did not have a guitar. Stu didn't have a bass. We lost everything. Really? And so I got a 4-piece kit, and Joe got, like, Ibanez sent him a guitar, and he got a Marshall half stack, and Stu grabbed whatever bass, and we finished that tour on nothing. And it was so much fun playing, you know, music that I was used to doing, these bombastic fills and double bass and everything. And now going back to just a floor tom alternating kick drum for a double bass roll. And so, you know, part of me loves to go down that 4-piece kit road and see what I can get out of it. So we'll see. But you're going to see me in Montreal and Quebec on my big one.
Yeah, for sure. Well, wow. Did they ever find the 18-wheeler, or is that still?
They did. About a month or 2 later, the police called up Joe one night. Some guy was driving down, like, under the big underpass of the 405, whatever's up there in San Francisco, and saw the back doors of this 18-wheeler wide open with people standing around. They were selling our gear out of the back of the truck. Now, fortunately for me, I had just done the Alice Cooper tour, the trash tour. So my massive kit were in cases so big you'd never be able to, move anything.
Yeah.
So the unfortunate thing is I lost 3 things that were never found. Excuse me. One of my Zildjian Noble and Cooley snare drums. They opened up and they took that out. Yeah. My 6.5 by 14 Tama bell brass, which is like the snare drum that everybody in the world wants now.
Yeah, basically.
And I had a 24-inch Swiss knocker from Simon Phillips that was in the case, and that was gone. Rest of my gear was there because it was too big for them to schlep. Yeah. Joe lost all of his guitars, all of his Soldano amps, but he ended up getting back quite a few. When the word got out, the guy that went there and stopped, he saw my flight cases that had Alice Cooper stenciled all over them and said, "Oh, this is hot material." So he bought a guitar of Joe's for like $300 or $400 or something, a $5,000 Ibanez, custom guitar, and went right to the police. When the police went to catch the people, they found the truck locked up. They never got the people, but we got our gear.
So that's nice. That's a good
happy ending.
Sort of happy ending. That's too bad. But yes, going back to what you're saying to the 4-piece kit, I think it goes back to the limitations, you know, like the fact that you have that and that's it, and you can do, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but limitations brings out more creativity and makes you basically play differently. And of course, we all start with, you know, those four piece kits or 5-piece kits when we're kids. So I think it's going back to that, you know, basement, as you say, sort of playing just a small kit and enjoying ourselves as much as we can.
Yeah, and it really makes you think about the song as a whole, beyond just the song as a drum part, which I do both now anyway. But of course, I do have to approach a lot of what we're playing by way of the drum part, because it's very integral to, you know, the song itself. So yeah, you know, we'll see what happens, but I do feel that 4-piece bug biting me.
I want to see that.
It seems easy.
I want to see that. Well, you know, as a kid, I would play Rush with a 5-piece kit, and to me, you know, that first tom would last about 2 bars, and then, you know,
right. But you find a way to get around. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. In my head, I was going, you know, 17 toms, you know, sort of thing. There's so much to talk about, and I'm sorry, my camera for some reason goes out of zoom, but I want to talk about, of course, other players and other people you play with. Of course, you mentioned Joe Satriani, another hero of mine personally. I've seen him a couple of times. I think maybe I've seen him with you without knowing it back in the day. But basically, talk to me about meeting him and working with him. How was that? How did that happen?
It was a chance, being at the right place at the right time. When I was playing with GTR, living in London still, and at that point I had a Gretsch drum kit on tour, and they make, and especially at that time, they made gorgeous drums, but business-wise, they didn't quite have it together, you know. And I wasn't acting like a prima donna or anything like that, but being on a big tour, you know, with the guitar players from Genesis and Yes, and flying around, you know, across the country playing all these shows, and having never done something to that extreme at that age, because I started playing with them when I was like 20 and a half or 21. I was really thrust into the deep end. You know, I would need like a hi-hat rod and a couple of springs for my floating action pedal, whatever I was using, you know, and 2 clamp-on boom arms. And I fall in the order, and 3 days later in Indianapolis, I would have a snare stand and a seat. You know? And so it started to get a little crazy. And I was playing Zildjian at the time, and very close to my friend who signed me in England. And I just remember talking to him one day saying, you know, I love my drums, but I'm having a very difficult time, you know, getting the right gear and whatever. And so he happened to mention to Joe Hibbs, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, who was one of my best friends for a long time. He was the artist relations guy at Tama, who had signed and was working with Bill Cobham and Simon and Bill Bruford and Kenny Aronoff, and, you know, all the guys.
All the guys.
And so when we were playing in Philadelphia, which is not far from where Tama was located, Hoshino, Joe came to the show and met me afterwards and basically said right away, we want you. You know, once you get done with the tour and you're back in London, we'll fly you a few days in Philadelphia. Let's go through drums and let's, you know, see what we can do. And we'd want you to be a clinician and all of these things that, you know, I had always dreamed of doing, and now they were starting to come true. So a few months later, I go to Philly, and I'm just hanging out all day with Joe Hibbs in the back warehouse, going through shells and bearing edges and geeking out on everything.
Right.
And, you know, it came to the end of the day, and we were going to go to dinner. And in the lobby area was another long hair at the time, rock and roll looking guy with a black leather motorcycle jacket like I had. And we were just looking at each other and, you know, hey, how you doing? I'm Jonathan. Oh, I'm Joe. I said, yeah, I'm a drummer. I play with Steve Howe and Steve Hackett. And he goes, oh, I'm a guitar player. I know who you are and whatever. And he said, by the way, would you be interested in playing with me and Steve Vai at the Hoshino event? And I said, yeah, that sounds great. What material? I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll make it up, type of thing. And so instead of going, I think we met in May, and the NAMM show is in the middle of June. This would have been Chicago in 1987. And so instead of going back to London, I went back to Massachusetts and hung out for a few weeks with my family, went to Chicago. We all played, made the stuff up as we went along, and did a big show at the Limelight. And after the gig, I didn't even hang with them. I just said, there was a lot of fun, nice meeting you guys. And I went off with a girlfriend that I had in Chicago. And so a week or two went by, and Joe called me up and said, Hoshino wants us to do it again in Tokyo at the Tokyo Music Fair. Are you up for it? And I said, yeah, sure. And so while we were in Tokyo, Surfing with the Alien came out in America, and I'm pretty sure it like hit the top 200. And it was the first instrumental guitar record since Blow by Blow from Jeff Beck to do that. And so he got, quite a bit of notoriety right away. And then it started talking a tour. Now, by this time also, Steve Hackett had left GTR a long time ago. I was, teetering back and forth because I originally had gotten the gig with Hackett before GTR came together. And I didn't really want to do it without Hackett. And, there was a lot of strife inside the band and everything between the two Steves, and it just wasn't a happy situation. So I just told Joe, yeah, I'm up for continuing. And that's how it came together. And, they booked like what I'm doing now for ProgJect. Joe got some help with booking his own little tour. And I don't remember the exact timeline, but I want to say it was maybe in the early 88 or end of 87, early 88, we had a string of East Coast dates, excuse me. And we had 6 nights sold out at the Bottom Line in New York City, 2 shows a night. We were playing 10, 12 shows a week. My hands were destroyed. Joe had no fingertips. Stu's thumb was going to fall off. I mean, we really worked it. And the second or third night in New York City at the Bottom Line, Simon was in New York, and we'd become good friends by this time, Simon Phillips. Simon was in New York rehearsing with Jeff Beck and Mick Jagger, because this was Mick's first big solo outing when the Stones were taking their hiatus.
Right.
So they were at SIR. And Simon and Doug Wimbish, bass player, and Phil,
Living Color, right.
Yeah, and Phil came to see us play because, Simon said they weren't doing anything that night. I said, a friend of mine, this young drummer, is playing with this new guitar. Let's go to the Bottom Line. So I put him on the list. The next thing we know, Jeff Beck quits the next day, and the word gets out that they now need a replacement for Jeff Beck in Mick Jagger's band. And, everybody around the world is calling in for the gig. And I don't know if it was Simon Wimbish or a few of them said, Mick, you should come out tonight to see Simon's friend Jonathan's playing with this new guitar whiz. He's really something else. Okay. That's a funny story. So, talk about Prague, I didn't grow up in guitar bands. Okay. I
was going to point out that you seem to go back to guitar players a lot for some reason.
Well, and the funny thing is, I knew how to play all of Tarkus before I knew how to play, Freebird. Okay, I didn't listen to the radio type of music. So Mick comes to the show, and then we finish the set. We're backstage, and Simon and Doug and Mick come walking through, and we're all, oh my God, Mick Jagger's here. And we meet him, and the next thing he goes, let's do a tune. Let me come up and sing with you. So Joe and he like, great, Lou, what do you want to do? And Mick goes, how about Red House? And I go, what's that?
Really? from Jimmy?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so Joe looks at me and looks at Mick, and it's like, sorry. and he goes, standard blues, just follow me. Yeah. So anyway, we get up there, we do a couple of numbers with Mick. And then the next day, Joe auditions for Mick. and gets the gig.
Wow.
And so, that was really a big, catapult for him. CNN did a story on him. Who's this unknown guy from San Francisco that taught Steve Vai, that replaced Jeff Beck when every other guitar player in the world auditioned or called in to audition. And so we did like another week or two of East Coast shows, and then we called it a day for a little while Joe went overseas to play with Mick.
That's right.
It didn't go as far as it was supposed to go. I think they did Japan and Australia and maybe like Jakarta or something, and then that was kind of the end of it. Mick's solo career was not like Keith's solo career, but it launched Joe. And that was the beginning of full time with Satriani. And man, when I tell you we toured, we did 9, 10, 12 plus 14 months nonstop with just a week off here or there, going around the world 1.5 times. And we really worked it. It was great. And that was my catalyst to move back to the States after 9 or so years in London.
In London, yeah, playing with of course, because before that, of course, was GTR and Marillion and all those bands, of course, before. Quickly, how was it to actually meet some of your heroes, which is, Steve Hackett, for instance, and to play with him? That must have been a treat.
It was, I can't say that I've had a situation where you shouldn't meet your heroes. I've had really good situations and great moments. There are some things that when they come down to a human level, it's hard to differentiate sometimes, who you thought they were or how you thought of them. But yeah, everybody's human. But Hackett was great. I had done the Marillion thing, which was short-lived because, it's no secret I did not get along with the lead singer, Fish. And
it is documented, yes.
Yeah. And the whole of the story isn't out there, but that's fine. It doesn't really matter.
It's okay.
But I got the gig, wrote some music with them, thought that I had struck, pay dirt, that this is it. I made it. I'm going to be a rock star. And Fish and I in the beginning were inseparable. I was staying with him in his apartment. He was taking me all over the London. I was like his little brother that he never had. But then once we got to Rockfield and I started writing with the guys, and it became more of the musicians and the vocalist lyricist, I didn't really realize, kind of the split of the camps, but it was what it was. And, it didn't go down very well. And that was it. Fish gave the guys an ultimatum. And of course they were going to take him over me, no problem. So, I'm out of the gig. And then, maybe a few weeks or a month later, I find out that one of the other drummers that was called in the beginning when we all auditioned was Ian Mosley. And they called him. I got the gig first and then they called him. And so, I put 2 and 2 together and I said, well, if he's not playing with Hackett, maybe Hackett needs a drummer. So I called up Hackett's manager and I said, I heard Ian's playing in Marillion. I just left the gig and I'd love to audition for Steve. And he literally says to me, we just finished auditions yesterday and Steve just found somebody for the European tour. Thanks for calling and, keep in touch. So I hang up the phone and say, okay, oh, well. And then about 15 minutes later, I called him back and I said, would you mind relaying a message to Steve? Tell him to give me an hour in a rehearsal room. And if I get the gig, he pays for the rehearsal room. And if I don't get the gig, it's on me. I hung up the phone. He called me back about a half an hour later and he said, Steve Hackett says you have big balls. And he said,
Indeed.
I don't remember which place it was, if it was John Henry's or where it was, but he said, be at John Henry's tomorrow at noon. And I believe the record Highly Strung was the one that had, come out, and that's the one he was going to tour on. Okay. And I knew it, and it had, there's one tune that was, I believe, in 13, 16, and it had a couple of turnarounds in 9 or 11, and I knew the tune. So we showed up the next day, and I met Steve. I was like, oh my God, here, with
I know exactly. Right.
Very nice, and he just plugged in, and I put my kit up, little kit, and he said, let's just jam around. Here's a riff for my latest record, and it was this thing in 13. And I jumped right on it. and started nailing it with him and did the stops and the starts and caught whatever was going on. And he stopped and he said, "The gig is yours. Do you want to smoke a joint?" Now, I don't do any drugs. I've never done cocaine. I've smoked pot a few times. It doesn't do much for me. It's part of me being a control freak. I don't really like the feeling of getting high. I enjoy a beer or a glass of wine, but I don't like when I get, stupid or want to go to sleep. So, but I wanted to indulge in, whatever. So I figured I'll take a little puff of pot and handle that. So he, lights up a spliff and he takes a big drag off of it and he hands it to me. And like an American idiot, I took a big hit and it was tobacco and hash. It was like I just swallowed a flamethrower. So
yeah.
I fell down to the ground and I'm choking and I'm flopping around like a fish out of water. And he's looking at me like, what kind of a little kid is this idiot? And when I finally got my breath and composed myself, I was like, it was tobacco and everything. And that was it. He gave me the gig. And it's funny because it was one of these moments where it turned into I have good news and bad news. So he gives me the gig, and it was November, I want to say November of '83, because I played with Marillion in August, September, or October of '83 when we did a show in Germany that turned into a live record, and then we went to Rockfield to record and demo. And so it was maybe within a month after that. So it was coming up to Christmas, I want to say, of '83. And I'm at Hackett's house for a Christmas party. And Chester Thompson, Tony Banks, and Mike Rutherford show up. Okay. Phil didn't show up, but it's okay. The others are there. And I couldn't believe it. And
would have showed up. maybe it would have killed you if Phil would have showed up.
Really, yeah. And so, Steve is introducing me as, the new young American drummer, and I got to meet these guys and hang out. Cool. And so I went home for the holidays, and I was basically waiting for Steve to say when to come back to start rehearsals. And so I get the call, I go back to London, and then he calls me up one day and says, I got good news and bad news. And I said, okay, give me the bad news. Well, I'm disbanding the outfit. There's no band. There's no European tour. I said, oh, great. What's the good news? I just had with lunch with Steve Howe. We're going to do a guitar-based supergroup, and we want you to be the drummer. And I said, okay, there you go.
That's good news.
DCR started out with the three of us in a rehearsal studio writing the original riffs. And then I don't remember if any other singers came in, but Steve Hackett knew of Max Bacon because he had guested or co-produced something for one of the records that Max was on. And so he brought Max down, and we had auditioned a couple of bass players, but I called in Phil Spalding as a favor because Phil was the guy that recommended me to Nick Tauber of Marillion, because I had auditioned and played with Phil and Joel Bogan with Toya when I first got to London. And so he knew Nick. Nick was saying, oh, I'm in the studio with Marillion, or excuse me, something, it's not working out with the drummer, and for various reasons. And Phil said, oh, you should check out this young American prog kid that just came over and auditioned for Toya. Toya's taken a year hiatus to do acting, so he's available. And they called me, and that's how I met and auditioned for Marillion.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's wow, that's interesting. But yes, that's some, as we say, some big kahunas to call Steve Hackett and say, I want to audition for you. That's ballsy, but that's great. That's a great story. But yeah, I mean, I've looked it up a bit, and I know that basically it was a good tour, a good experience. But I know, and without divulging too much, but I know that the band didn't get along or something like this along those lines, or something of the sort happened, that which gave you the permission, if you will, to then move on to other things such as Joe Satriani.
It was, it was really just two very different camps. The Steve Hackett, maybe, Genesis way of doing things, and then there was the Steve Howe Yes way of doing things. And they were both very different, whereas, one band would write in the studio and piece things together. The other band would write in the rehearsal and and really work it up and then go record it.
Mhm.
And, you know, we had Jeff Downs was chosen as the producer. You know, great guy, amazing keyboard player, but I don't think that he was in the right position to produce. Not that he couldn't do it technically, you know, because he knew how to engineer and everything, but he was more along the camp of the Yes side because of Brian Lane also managing the band.
I see.
So right away from like the beginning of recording in the studio, things always shied away from Hackett and more of, yeah, you know, and so that was kind of the beginning there. And then when it came time to tour, you know, each guy had their own manager, tour manager.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and their own way of traveling.
Wow.
You know, Steve Howe didn't like to fly, so he drove the entire U.S. tour with his own tour manager,
Okay.
and, you know, stayed in his own hotels along the way and did his thing. And then, you know, Hackett had his entourage too. So it was really kind of the Steves had their own lives. And look, you know, they were the big, you know, they were the guys. They were the
attraction, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They can do what they want. And they had enough years of slugging it out. So me, Phil, and Max, and the keyboard player that we brought out were kind of the kids in the band that just did our own thing on our own time. And we all showed up to play a show. But when you say like meeting heroes, like I really expected a big, happy, incredible family unit that was going to write together and rehearse and talk about the design of the show and do this and that. And it was really, it wasn't like that at all, which again is no real fault of anybody's. It was just kind of the way it was. So by the time we got on tour, you know, two Steves went in different directions and the other four of us were kind of in the middle. And by the time it all came to an end, it came to an end, you know?
Yeah. It almost sounds like the parents are fighting and the kids are stuck in the
Yeah. Oh, it was. And it was, you know, what's the best way to divorce is really what it turned out to be. And so, you know, we had plans at the end of '86 to go out to Steve Howe's farmhouse in Devon to start writing the new material for the second record. And so everybody showed up except for Steve Hackett. We were told he was going to come the following week. So me, Steve, and Phil started writing. And I write. I've got lots of riffs. And, you know, just like I do.
Not on drums, but of course on instruments.
Yeah, piano, mostly piano. Yeah.
Piano, okay.
And so, you know, I can come up with a riff and sing it. And that's how I wrote Punch and Judy for Marillion. I came up with the main riff of Punch and gave it to Mark Kelly. And all this, next thing you know, everybody's playing what became their first like single or whatever it was. And so it was the same thing with GTR. And I got to tell you, the first 3 or 4 tunes that me, Phil, and Hal wrote together was smoking. They were really good. And I was excited that, okay, maybe now we've gotten past that. We don't want to be Asia Part 2. Right. We want to be GTR. But then Steve Hackett called me the next week and said, look, I'm not coming back to the band. And, you know, I'd like you to continue with me if you want to continue with me. And I said, I do want to play with you, you know, because I like your solo material. And we started this thing in a way. But, you know, I wish you would hear some of the new material because it really is cool. And it's better than the first record that we just did that was terribly watered down with a lot of keyboards and synclavia. And he, you know, he wasn't closed off to it, but he wasn't too enthusiastic. And I said, well, you know, Christmas is coming up, so I'm going to think about it too. And when I got back home, for a variety of reasons, it just hit me that I didn't want to do either. You know, it wasn't what I signed up for, and it was a great launch. And this is before I met Satriani. But I knew that if it wasn't going to be both Steves, and you know, it was a little hokey too, because Steve Howe and Brian Lane were saying, well, what other Steves out there have a last name that starts with H? Oh, Steve Hillage. We can call Steve Hillage. And it was almost so a bit of comedy to it, like, you know, or do, you know, it's like when Emerson and Lake were getting back together, who can we get with a P?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, well, Emerson, Lake and Phillips. I know they wanted Simon, but and Emerson, Lake and Powell. So it was kind of the same thing where they were trying to think of another guitar player, preferably with SH, or at least as a Steve. And at that point, it just it was time to move on.
I was about to say, because it takes a lot of character and also sort of respect for yourself to leave such a situation where you're like, I'm basically not going to be playing with my, would-be hero or someone I love to play with, and to do something that, you feel, I need to move away from this and do something else.
It also took a bit of, dare I say, reckless abandon and a bit of stupidity. And I say that because, and I don't mean this in an egocentric way at all, because I know that, making it, quote unquote, is a combination of things where luck is a big part of it. But I do believe that you can find your luck, or at least make it easier for luck to find you. And then you have to back up, you have to, back up your words, basically. So
you have to be prepared to whatever situation the luck is bringing to you. Yes.
And put the money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
So, I had some good experiences in school. I dished against some big Boston drummers, and I'd gotten some gigs. And then, when I went to London, things moved fairly quickly. When I auditioned, the Toya thing recommended to Marillion. I auditioned against a bunch of, London named drummers when I was 19 and a half or whatever it was, and I got the Marillion gig, even though it didn't last.
That's
and then,
yeah.
And then it fell into place with Steve. So I kind of stupidly, but I'm not sorry that I did it, also felt, well, I'll get the next thing.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I see what you mean.
And I was lucky that Satriani was the next thing. But in hindsight, it was very ballsy to do something like that, and to tell Steve Howe and Steve Hackett, I'm, kind of not into it. And good luck. I'll see you guys around. But we're okay.
Let's change gears, because yes, prog is very much near dear to heart, but there is an artist that fascinates me that I think you just had. I think you've said in other reviews that you enjoyed just as much, was Aretha Franklin, which I think you've played for about 4 years or so. And tell me, how does that happen, and what is it? What is the job requirement, or how does that work compared to something that's so instrumental and very proggy and very lengthy, compared to something that's, I guess, is more singer and backing up someone, I guess.
Well, I can tell you that growing up in my basement, prog and dap and fusion is all I listened to and practiced to. But every once in a while, I would do two things. I would just throw on the radio, not knowing what station, and just dial until music would come on, and then I would just play to it. I would learn to navigate the roadmaps of A, B, A, and you start to get comfortable, and you start to realize 90% of music is the same format and formula. You just got a couple of things you have to look out for, but you can pretty much sit down and play almost anything with a basic guide. But the two artists that I used to put the records on and play to and dream of playing with, knowing that I'd never have the opportunity, were Aretha and James Brown, and especially James. I mean, Cloud, and
that's a whole other monster right there.
I love practicing to that stuff. I was a big Bernard Purdy fan, of course. So Curtis, King Curtis and Aretha live at the Fillmore, and Eleanor Rigby live, and all that stuff. I knew it all. So anyway, I was years later, I'm living in New York after London, and it was a spring afternoon of late April or May, 91, because I wasn't touring with Joe. We had already done the whole flying tour, and I was out riding my Harley one afternoon, enjoying the weather.
Nice.
It was a Friday. It's about 2:00 in the afternoon, and I walk in my apartment, and I see a message on my machine, and I play the message, and I'll never forget. It goes, "This is Andrew Holt from Arista Records looking for Jonathan Mover. Are you available to sight read a gig tonight in Boston with Aretha Franklin? Please call me back. So first I thought maybe it's a joke, because I did have some friends play, jokes on me.
Okay.
They leave you a message and Eric Clapton is offering you the gig for 20 grand a week, and it's not Eric, it's, whatever. So, I pick up the phone and I call the guy and he answers. I said, this is Jonathan Mover. Oh, Clive Davis asked me to call you, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I think you're looking for Jonathan Moffett. He's the black R&B drummer from the Jacksons and Madonna and George Michael.
Right.
I'm the white rock guy with a nose ring and a chain
long
in
hair.
He's with Satriani and Alice Cooper. and he goes, no, you're the guy. Clive knows you from GTR. Can you do it? You got to sight read the gig. I said, yeah, absolutely. And so I grabbed my stick bag and with my jeans and a t-shirt and a black leather jacket and hair down to my ass. And I ran to the airport and I flew to Boston, took a taxi, got to the Colonial Theater at about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock show. And they gave me the book of charts, which was, this big. And they picked out the 20 songs we were playing. I grabbed my yellow Sharpie, my highlighter, and I got the charts and I made my notes of the horn stabs and, here's the coda, here's the repeat, get the roadmap ready. And then about 10 minutes before 8 o'clock, the director, the conductor comes in and says, okay, swapping out this, and now the 20 songs I've been studying for 50 minutes are now, most of them are new. Anyway, get up on stage and I'm playing and I'm reading and I can't believe I am on stage with the Queen of Soul. The gig is killing me. And I'm in my hometown of Boston, which is incredible. And so, we're about an hour into the gig and we're playing. I don't even remember the song. And Aretha turns around and says, give the drummer some, and gives me a solo. And so, in my best impersonation of a mixture of Bernard Purdy and Steve Jordan and Gad, I just groove out with some fills, do my thing. We finish the tune. And she says, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce my drummer for the evening, but I have no idea who it is. He just, came up from New York to sit in, and thank him very much. And, I got a round of applause. And then after the show, I went up to her and I said, Miss Franklin, can I take a photo with you? If I never played drums again, my career is complete. This was really a once in a lifetime chance. And thank you so much. And she put her arms around me, took a photo, and she said, I enjoyed your playing, and you read very well. If I need you again, can I call you? I said, yes, of course, no problem. And so that was it. I wasn't even staying over that night. I was actually taking like a 3 a.m. train back to New York City.
Okay.
What I didn't know was that was the last night of that leg that they were doing.
Okay.
So, I went back and kind of waited Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for a phone call, which didn't come. And I thought, okay, it happened once. I can say I played with Aretha.
Right.
And then about, 3 or 4 weeks later, the tour manager called me up and said, that gig that you played there's a backstory to it that I'll let go. But,
okay.
I ended up getting a gig because her drummer had a conflict, let's just say.
Okay.
And the conflict didn't resolve itself. So Aretha said, I'll resolve it for you. And so I was the resolve. And so a few weeks went by and he said, Aretha enjoyed your playing. If you want the gig, she'll continue with you. And I said, absolutely. So it was amazing. I could stay online with you all night and tell you some of the greatest stories and some of the funniest and the craziest things that happened. Traveling with them and being a part of that entourage. But playing with her was really just every night was a gift and a blessing. And, like a lot of the artists I've worked with, she gave 110% every night. Yeah. And, aside from her just being a brilliant, show person and an incredible singer and a great pianist, she was a wonderful person. And just the audience came first. And she was awesome. I made a big mistake. You know, I had the gig for 4+ years, and it was never consistent. You know, it was 2 or 3 weeks here, and then a couple of months, and then a few weeks here. She didn't travel a lot. She was afraid to fly. Never went on a train or a bus or all that stuff. And so it was a lot of repetition, 2 or 3 times a year, playing the same places. But you know, fortunately, the 2 or 3 things I've done with Joe were in downtime periods with her, and so I was able to do sessions and do some touring. And so 95 came rolling around, and I had just done, you know, quite a few legs with her in the beginning of 95, and then they basically said she's going to take off the rest of the year. And coincidentally, Joe wanted to get me and Stu back together after, you know, 4 years. And I said, yeah, you know, why not? Let's give it a shot. So there's yeah, I'm just trying to remember the time frame. I had gotten. It would have been like, yeah, spring of 95, because that's when the record that he did with Meno Cache came out, and we were going to tour that. So Joe had just given me a bunch of the first dates with rehearsals and everything, and I'm gearing up to be out for a long time. And Aretha's tour manager calls up and says, oh, we've got one short thing that we're going to do, and, you know, here are the dates. And, you know, again, I didn't know. I don't know if I would have done anything different, but I said, oh, you know what? I can do everything but the last 2 shows because I'm going back out with Joe Satriani. I thought we were in the clear. And, you know, he just said, oh, okay, I'll let Aretha know. Maybe we can just find a sub for those 2 shows. And I'm sure he hung up the phone and said, you know, see you later. And sure enough, they got Bernard back. And so Bernard ended up doing, like, you know, a bit of a reunion tour with her, and which was really cool. And I went out with Joe, and I was out for a while. So, you know, live and learn, but that's how it came to an end for me. But I saw her 2 or 3 times after that, because I kept in touch with the guys in the band. And when they came to New York, you know, they would invite me out. And whenever I saw her, she was, oh, Jonathan, how are you? Who are you playing with? And, you know, I remember one time saying to her, you know, you're not the only, how did I say it? I said, you're not the only female star from Detroit that I've worked with. And she got really defensive and says, oh, really? And who else? I said, Alice Cooper. And she just lost it. We had a good relationship. She was really great. And, you know, I just, again, that's a gig I never thought I would get. And when I got the gig, I remember getting a flurry of phone messages from, like, Greg Bissonette and Simon and Joe Franco and a few other guys. Like, how did you get that? You know, come on. But, you know, I think one of the funny things about it was, you know, pre-Aretha, you know, I had done some great gigs, but I wasn't known as a drummer for my groove. But all of a sudden, Movers came to the, he can groove. But before I couldn't groove, you know. So I did get to start to do different gigs around New York City also, and work with some different producers. And I got heavily, partly because of my sight reading chops, but I got heavily into the jingle scene as well. And
let me just cut you off there, because you're sort of, and I want to touch base on this because, of course, we're a drumming show, but it seems that you get called a lot, like, last minute.
Yeah.
And you get there and you're preparing for, like, what is the best? Is it reading? Is it just, of course, all the years of just, you know, playing and practicing? Like, what is it that prepares you for those last minute calls, and how do you prepare for those moments?
Yeah, I think, well, it's, I think reading with your ears is more important than reading with your eyes, unless you get a call for a jingle or Aretha Franklin, where you've got a book of charts, and that is a prerequisite to do the gig. But, you know, when I got the call with Alice Cooper, when I got the call with Fuel, or any of these other sessions that I've done, which is a last minute rescue call, it's going in with an open mind. I think, having played so much difficult music in the beginning, you know, Zappa and Mahavishnu Orchestra, and, you know, early Chick Corea and Weather Report and Genesis and Yes and Crimson, you know, when you've got that stuff under your belt, and you can put on a rock radio station and play to 99% of it and not even know what you're playing. It gives you, it gives you the tools and the building blocks and the foundation to jump into something pretty quick. And so I think for me, that's really what helps me and what gives me that opportunity. Excuse me. Also, I love it. I really love the challenge of, a producer that's sweating bullets because they're 200 grand down. They don't have a drum track. He's responsible for delivering the record. And, somebody is at Sony or Warner Brothers with a gun to his head saying, you got to pull a rabbit out of your hat. And I get to play a record guy with the band for 10 years. And I really love doing that. I really, really enjoy it. It's a challenge. And the same thing for sight reading. When you show up to do a jingle, even though I do have good reading chops, which came from the studies with Chafee, it's still, a little, you get a bit nervous, and they hand you the chart and you get, 2 or 3 minutes to look at it, pull out your yellow marker, do whatever. And then you play it down once, and you play it down once for the producer to listen to what you're playing, for the engineer to dial in the songs, and then for the 2 or 3 people from the ad agency to see it all played along with the TV screen that shows the commercial. And then they do the revisions on the spot. And you, with your pencil, you make it change, and that's it. 1 or 2 takes and you're done. If you didn't get it, they'll never call you again. And, you either get an answer or you get work. And I just love the challenge. I really do. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's that confidence in yourself that you can do it, basically. It's that confidence that, okay, this is the situation, this is how I'm going to deal with it, and not get too nervous or emotional about it, basically. Yeah.
And, and you also, there's a trust factor also in 3 things, trusting in yourself, trusting that the producer has called you, because he knows you can do it. And then, trusting that the whole thing is going to make sense. And, I'll never forget, we were doing a jingle quite a few years ago in New York for Pizza Hut. And it was a crazy jingle of lots of odd time measures, one after another, and a lot of snare hits that were in like 5/16, and then with a dotted quarter rest, and then 3/16. And I'm looking at it and I'm getting, okay, this is crazy, but let's do it. And so we play it down and we nail it. And, I said to the producer, I said, can I see the TV? And I can't imagine how this is going to look, how this is going to fit. And like the 5/16, snare hits was the chopping of the pizza slices. And then the rest was sprinkling cheese on it. And then you see the whole thing put together, and you get this feeling of trusting in the whole thing, that it makes sense and you deliver. And it's cool. It's a lot of fun.
Let's talk about more of your personal drumming. Would you say you're more of a compositional drummer or more improvisational? Because I'm going to make myself dated here, but like we said at the start of the before the interview, I know you from this VHS tape. Which for any of you, I'm sure it's available now in a digital form and not analog form.
Right.
Which is sticking time, linear time, rhythm, and meter. Which you studied with, and Gary features you basically to do a solo on that video, and I like it because to me it sounds like a composition, what you do on that, if I may say so. But I was just wondering to get your own take, like how, when you want to do a solo, want to do some sort of creative drum part, is it compositional, or say, let's just do some takes and see what happens, sort of thing?
Okay, so let me answer this in a few ways. First, I've got to tell you about the shooting of that video.
Sure, go ahead.
So, those are the guys from Hudson, Rob and Paul, and it's shot in my studio. So my segment, and Gary's segment, I believe, is in Skyline Studios. And I had one of the nicest studios in New York. Everybody recorded there, from Paul Simon to Madonna, and you name it, Miles Davis in his day. So we had 2 or 3 times that we were scheduled to do this video for Gary, and each time something came up. I either got a call for another gig or the studio got booked with a big artist and I couldn't turn down the money. And so Rob finally says to me, look, tomorrow's the shoot. Okay, it's happening, or we're not doing it. Okay, we've already booked your place 3 times and I've got a crew and you'll see you there tomorrow at 10. No excuses. So I get up and I'm getting ready. And most of my career, I've always played in combat boots. I have paratrooper boots. It's just what I'm comfortable in.
Okay.
But for whatever reason, that day I put on a pair of Chuck Taylor Converse All-Stars.
To me, they're their best drumming shoes, to me personally.
And they must have been for me for that day too. But I go walking out of my apartment and they're doing construction in the front of the building. And I step on a piece of wood that has a 4-inch nail going right up through it.
Okay.
And you get that electric shock that goes through your body. And I look down and I see the tip of a nail sticking right through my foot, through my sneaker. And I lift my foot up and I'm impaled. And so I rip it out of my foot and I live on a 4-floor walk up and I hobble back upstairs and I call Rob and I say, you're not going to believe this. He goes, I don't want to hear it. I said, I just stepped on a 4-inch spike. I got a hole in my foot. I have to go to the doctor to get stitches and whatever. He goes, I'll see you at the studio. I said, okay. So I go down the street to my doctor, and not only does he give me like 2 or 3 stitches in the heel, the base of my foot, the pad, but also on the top. And then he gives me a tetanus shot.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I hobble into Skyline, and it's my right foot.
Oh, really? Not even the hi-hat foot? Oh, shoot. Okay.
My right foot, I got a bandage on inside, and my right arm with a tetanus shot. I had no idea I was going to feel like somebody hit me with a baseball bat.
Yes.
So I could barely lift my arm. I was almost in tears playing. And when I finished shooting and I pulled my sneaker off, it was just red. I was in a pool of blood. I tore the stitches, and but we did it. So to answer your question, in that situation for soloing, it was more compositional in the sense that Gary had asked me to display a few things, linear playing, solo over on an ostinato, and maybe some polyrhythm or something. So I kind of had a little bit of a design that was given to me. And so within the parameters of what Gary wanted me to display, because I think the other video has Steve Smith in it, and Steve, I want to say, does stickings, and I did the other stuff. So in a situation like that, I kind of had a roadmap, you might say. For other situations, like, doing drum solos with Satriani and other gigs, it often would depend on the song that I was either soloing in or coming out of and or going back into. And again, that would kind of give me a roadmap. And it's usually just a combination of, what's in my head at the time, what do I want to, put forth as a drummer, as a musician, as a rhythmist, to the audience and whatever. And I must say, though, I certainly went through different phases, and I guess a maturation, period where I don't like to solo anymore. And
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And everybody's asking me for a solo. And I play so much, start to finish, I don't need a solo. But just in general, I got all of that out of my system when I was 15, 20, 25, 30, with Joe and with Alice Cooper and Frank Gambale and everybody else that I played with. That was the fusiony, chops, chops, chops thing. And, maybe it was playing with Aretha, or maybe it was going more down the groove road and also starting to do a lot of the alternative type of mid to late 90s, early 2000 records like Fuel and Oleander, where the song was more important, and me coming up with these nuances within a groove, to me, was cooler than doing the great fill that's going to stick out. You know, sometimes I would throw something in, but so yeah, I really kind of went from one thought process of, I'm going to show you all the chops that I've ever learned because I can't do it in the song, to now I don't want to do any of that, but you know, once in a while I'll do something and show what I can do. And it's the same thing for me musically too, because I did really overplay a lot in my early years.
Okay.
And
well, that's interesting, because one question I want to ask is what would you not do today that you did back then? And I think you're about to answer this question exactly.
Yeah, I mean, just I think I wouldn't do anything now that interrupts the flow. I don't want to say groove, because you can still do great things within a groove, but that interrupts the flow and the composition of the song. And I think I did that early on, but I also was lucky that I had the framework to be able to do it in. You know, when you're playing in GTR, or you're playing with Frank Gambale, or you're playing with Joe Satriani, there is a bit of license there because your audience is expecting it and wanting it. But you know, I learned many great lessons from Alice Cooper, but one very important lesson when I got the rescue call for him in 1989, and you know, I knew half the material from growing up with it, so I was familiar with it, but I didn't know anything after like Welcome to My Nightmare. That was really the last of what I had really dug into as a kid. A little bit of Flush the Fashion I liked, but you know, they wanted a big drum solo. So, okay, and I've got my massive Satriani kit, double bass, you know, toms everywhere, gong bass drum, gong, all of it. And I'm up there and I'm doing my drum solo on the first night, and I'm playing polyrhythms, and I'm soloing over Terry Bozzio bass drum ostinatos, and you know, and I do my thing, and I do it the next night and the next night. And Alice comes up to me and says, you know, you got a minute? I go, yeah. He goes, you know, your drum solo, man. I said, what about, you know, I'm playing 7 over 3, and then I'm soloing over this, and then, you know, it's like it's not really happening. You're way over the audience's head.
Yeah. Okay.
Play it along. And I said, well, you know, what do you mean? I'm either, you know, you know, do, you know, quads, do that type of stuff. Big crashes off of this, and you know, I did, and all of a sudden, 12,000 people, you know, and you know, so you learn things along the way.
That's interesting because I remember going to having a chance to meet Steve Gadd once. He came to Montreal for sort of a clinic. He knows someone here in town who's a friend, and everybody's asking, "Oh, how was the Asia record?" And how's, you know, all these questions. And I asked him, I says, I don't want to ask you like how you did. I want to ask you like, what's the one advice you would give to drummers? And he says, never lose the audience.
Yeah. And see, I had already had, you know, probably, well, if we're talking an audience, but I'd already probably recorded 30 to 50 records and had done, you know, 10 tours before Alice, you know, kind of slapped some sense in me and made me realize I'm not playing for, you know, 400 fusion kids, or, you know, an audience of fusion heads, you know, with a Satriani crowd. I'm now in front of 10, 12,000 people in a hockey rink that, you know, want to relate to me. And so that was a great lesson, and I've never forgot that. Yeah. So, you know, again, part of maturing.
I'll ask a few questions, and then I thank you so much. I didn't think we talked so long, but you got so many good stories and so many good tips for everyone. When does the studio part come? When do you transfer to being, you know, sound engineer and studio owner? And is that just a natural progression of you wanting to learn more, to do something different? Like, how did that happen for you?
Boredom. It began. It came about in a few different ways. The first was when it came time to record the GTR record. You know, we had rehearsed all the material for quite some time, and we were ready to go. We went into Townhouse, And it's the first time I ever played to a click. Jeff Downs said, we're going to do the entire record to a metronome. And I said, oh yeah, sure, no problem. And then I went, oh my God, but then I remembered an interview with Andy Newmark where he said, the person asked him, how do you play so well to the click? And he said, I imagine that cowbell is Ralph McDonald, and he's just playing along with me and I'm playing along with him. And so I just imagined that the cowbell on the side stick was Andy Newmark in London with me. And so from the first second, I heard the tick, 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 we just nailed it. So Phil Spalding and I were done with the entire record, all drums, all percussion, and I played timpani and marching snare and gong and all sorts of things, and vibes and mallets are on that record that you can barely hear because of all the reverb, but it's on there. And and Phil did all of his bass parts and everything. We were done in 5 days. And so I then found myself in the studio, very excited to be in Townhouse in London with Steve and Steve, but with nothing to do. So, I really just hovered over the board. And at the same time, I began my friendship with Simon Phillips. Simon was really one of my absolute biggest heroes, still to this day. And he's a dear friend of mine.
And he's very nice. I got to meet him 2 years ago, and he was so sweet. And he was so, how are you doing? Shook my hand and everything. And I'm looking at him going,
Yeah, he was like that 35 years ago when I met him too. And he would invite me to clinics and to gigs and all of that, which was just incredible. And I knew that Simon was a demon engineer, and half the reason his drums always sounded so good was he knew what he was doing in the studio. So I also wanted to learn some of that too. But it really came to the forefront for me when I inadvertently ended up owning Skyline, and I found myself owning one of New York's biggest recording studios with an incredible board and a mic collection and all of these, engineers from Jay Messina to, Nico Bolas and all of these guys coming in that worked with Steve Gadd and Paul Simon and Omar, and Nile Rodgers was doing sessions in there. And now again, watching these guys and hearing, Omar come in one day and hearing what his drums sounded like. Now, yes, the guy is a beast of a player and he knows how to play, but Nile Rodgers knows how to engineer and produce.
That's right.
Simon knows how to engineer and produce. Steve Lillywhite knows how to engineer and produce. And so when you get to that place, and I started owning my own studio, I started farming out tracks. I played on a lot of records because there I was in my place. And we would have an artist in the studio with a drummer problem, or something would happen, or they'd look up at the walls covered with my gold and platinums and to say, oh, Jonathan Mover. Oh, Jonathan Mover, that you? Oh, you're the drummer? You own the place too?
Right.
You got some time? You want to play on my record? And that's what happened with Julian Lennon. And so I always wanted to have great drum sounds, and I had the studio to do it. So, I learned from the best just watching them and asking them questions.
Right.
But it's also one of the reasons that I don't do a lot of farming out anymore. It's
meaning, what is that exactly?
Recording drum tracks and sending them out.
Oh,
because, for 2 reasons really. Number one, I don't think the music is that great anymore with most of the people that ask me to play on their records, honestly. And if I'm not sorry to play on it, I'm not going to. I don't need the money. And I, once in a while, I do get a great session. I'm happy to go and play on it because I love the music or I love what I can give to it. But I get a lot of people that just want me on their record because they're a Satriani fan, and it just doesn't interest me. The other thing that really pisses me off is I spend a lot of time on getting great drum sounds and delivering drum tracks that are ready to go, that make sense. And 90% of these people these days that have a Pro Tools rig at home, they are not producers, they're not engineers, they don't know how to mix, They destroy your shit. You hear the record 6 months later, and it sounds like you're playing cardboard boxes. Why did I spend all that time?
Very compressed, very
yeah. They don't know how to EQ them. They don't know how to blend gates, blending a room. And I had an experience about a year or so ago that somebody begged me to do all of this stuff on their record, and I really. I went to the studio that they wanted me to go to, and the engineer completely fucked up my tracks.
Okay.
We got all the drum sounds. I go into the room, I'm listening back. I helped tweak the board. I'm pretty happy. I said, do me a favor, as we're running, make sure you watch the screen for any flat lines. You see anything like in Pro Tools, if you play all the do this, your mic is dead, or something got unplugged, or your channel is bad. This is the stuff that you got to read. Because if something goes wrong, you don't want to find this out after after I'm home.
Yeah, exactly.
So we did the entire record in one day, and then I said, okay, I'll take the hard drive home, I'll prep the files, and I'll give them to you, ready to mix, ready to go. 3 mics did not record. One of them was the overhead.
Yeah, so no room cymbals. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
One of them was the hi-hat, and then one of them was a tom. And I was livid. I did not want to go back in and replay the tracks. I was so angry now. So, I put on my Pro Tools hat, and I spent a week fixing and rebuilding the microphones that didn't exist so that they would get a stereo, pan and everything. Yeah. And then they asked me to do percussion. And this I did at home. So I wanted to give them. So I said, for example, all right, here's the drum track to this tune. Hi-hat is fixed. Overheads are, good. Your room is balanced. If you're going to go with the tambourine here in this verse, mute the shaker, but then bring the tambourine, bring the shaker in here and then mute the tambourine so that these things come and go and that builds up each section. So your first verse, starts here, but then you add this element and now you got it here. Third verse comes around here and it's this big because when you did the bridge, you brought in the tambourine and now you've got this multi-layered thing. And so, I send them the tracks. Every song has an email with a description of exactly what to do, what to mute, what. They didn't read anything. They left everything unmuted. So each verse has a shaker, a tambourine, and I got the record and I listened to it and I was like, what were you guys listening to? Like, what the fuck? Oh, it all sounds great. And I just said, that's why I love ProgJect, because I don't have to deal with this stuff with other people. I get to play my ass off, at least in my own head. I think I'm playing my ass off. The audience is enjoying it. I'm playing with great people. I'm playing the music that you can't write any better. There's nobody that's going to call me today. Even, I got the chance to play with John McLaughlin once, which was a dream come true. McLaughlin would not be able to hire me today and give me the same music that I would feel playing Intermounting Flame. It's just not going to happen. That music at that time does something to me that music today just won't do. So ProgJect makes me so happy being able to do that. It allows me to feel like I'm not really missing out on anything right now by not taking every session that I get offered if I don't want to take it.
Right. Do you? I'm curious. Do you think an era like that will ever come back? Do you think an era like that, or is it because it's not at the forefront, but it's still alive? There's still progressive music being done today, but it's not just at the forefront.
Well, I think there's progressive creative music being done. Tool is great progressive. In my opinion, the greatest progressive rock band after our progressive rock is Jane's Addiction. I love Jane's Addiction, but I did Tool, like what Radiohead did. That's prog in a sense, but I think the attention span is gone from people, and TikTok is 10-second videos. And there's no money on Spotify, or there's no way to really make the living that you could make years ago doing. There's a little bit of that audience left, which is what we're catering to.
Mhm.
You know, we're trying to play sit-down venues because our audience is definitely from mid to late 40s up, unless they're bringing it in. And we play a long show. We got a 2.5-hour show, and it's a lot of notes. So we don't want our audience standing unless we don't have a choice. So no, I think just like with books and with films, because I love to read and I do love great movies, you still get bits and pieces of brilliant things out there, but they're few and far in between. Most of what we get is just watered down crap for stupid people. It really is. I mean, even lyrics, like when you look at the lyrics of what's selling on the radio today, and compared to pop music of what was selling in the 60s and 70s, when you had Joni Mitchell as a lyricist, and you had Roger Waters as a lyricist, and Peter Gabriel, Pete Sinfield. I mean, those people were writing things and saying things that really meant something to intelligent people that had their eyes wide open to the world of, whether it was Vietnam or politics or, going to the moon. When you think about what was happening in the world and the information that was out there, and everybody was so hungry for it, and you just don't have that anymore.
I will convey with you because I'm part of a percussion group. And when we started 25 years ago, we could play a beat that was 3 minutes long and people were interested in us playing that percussion part,
Right.
Today we play maybe a minute and I can see some faces go and sort of wander off because, we're not doing something that's as interesting or whatever. So yeah, I think I convey with you as a performer that the attention span has indeed changed. And it was, I think prog also was a beautiful marriage with vinyl, where you would just put the needle, sit there with your headphones, and just basically just listen to it
and look at the big record cover.
The big record,
exactly. The artwork. I mean, it was an all-encompassing experience. It really was, and you just don't get that today for a variety of reasons. It's and I mean, I think live playing is prospering, to a certain degree more than it was a few years ago, because nobody's making money selling, digital music anymore. So, they have to go out and play, which I think is great. But the audience is just not there for what it used to be. You've got, I don't know how they do it, but you've got kids spending $2,500 to see Taylor Swift, who I think is great. She's an amazing artist. And yet, we're trying to get $50 for a ticket, and sometimes it's pulling teeth to get people to come out. So it's a whole different world. And I just don't think I also don't think that people in general see the beauty in the world the way we did growing up. And again, it's the same thing with books and films. You watch a film, 99% of the films today, you're just getting, people murdered, things are blown up. You see some tits and ass with a beautiful girl, and you're happy. You've been fed what you're supposed to eat. But where is the movie that makes you think about, what if the world was like this, or what if this really happened? Like the way Terry Gilliam gets you to think about.
No, I see what you mean.
Milan Kundera writes a story. They take you you travel their road, into
their mindset and into what they're, exactly. I think it's still there. I don't think it's in Hollywood, but I think it's still there. Here in Quebec, we have more of a repertoire sort of cinema. That's not as, of course, we can't compete with the States, but there's more of those family types and also those dramas and those sort of relationship-y sort of movies. I think it's still there, but yes, you do have to dig deeper to find that stuff, I think. Stays.
I mean, I find myself, I watch mostly foreign films and foreign series. Even like murder mystery series, the foreign ones are very intelligent. They don't just hand it to you and expect you to believe everything. But 90% of the time I'm watching something where I've got to read subtitles because I don't understand what's going on, and I will not want an overdub of English. No, thank you. You know, it's got to be the real thing.
Before we get into the politics and religion, I'm going to stop there.
Yeah. No problem.
Well, I think we're going to stop there, because if we continue, we're almost at 2 hours. But thank you so much, Jonathan, for
Cool.
taking so much time with me. It's really much a treat. So again, ProgJect is where you're at right now. It's coming to Quebec very soon in June.
Yeah, in June. I'm still trying to wrap up the loose ends for Montreal. We have an offer for Nova Scotia, and we're playing Hamilton/Toronto. So this is dipping our big toe into the Canadian waters, and this is just the beginning. You know, we finally got some dates. We're very excited to come up, and yeah, it's towards the last week of June, and then every time we go out afterwards, we'll be there.
Fantastic. I can't wait. I can't wait to come and see you guys and actually
yeah, we'll meet in person and hang, and for sure. Yeah, as soon as I've got the rest of the information solidified, I'll email you everything, and we'll make plans accordingly, and you're in for a treat, I guess. Satisfaction guaranteed.
I'm sure of it. Being a prog fan myself, I'm sure I will enjoy myself. So people want to know where they can look up ProgJect and all your information.
Yeah, ProgJect.com, which is ProgJect, no hyphen, one word. And when you do Google it or put it in there, your autocorrect is going to change it to ProgJect. So make sure you put the G in. And FaceTime and Twitter and Instagram, and it's all on there. I don't do a lot of the social media, but I'll post what I can. But yeah, ProgJect.com, and there's promo videos up there, and whoever's in the touring unit at the time, because I had some other people coming and going, it started to get a bit confusing. But I've taken all the extras down, and now it's just the 5 guys that are out up there, so there's no confusion. And yeah, and again, this I'm very proud of what I've done with the guys for the last 2 years. But this next tour with the material and the new arrangements, now that Alessandro's on board, man, it's gonna drop your jaw.
Cool. I'm very looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening, and yeah, looking forward to it. All the best to you, Jonathan.
See you soon. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, ciao.
So there it is, our episode for tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Jonathan, for taking so much time with us. I'm wishing you all the best. Please come to this show. It's going to be an amazing show. Until then, all the best to you. See you next episode. Ciao, ciao.